How many people read poetry? How many people have had a poem written for them? Okay, you ready? Great. Wow. Okay, then we can all go. Okay.
Well, good evening. So good evening. Welcome to this month's Poet Laureate event. My name is Jonathan Revelo. I am the facilities manager for the Altadena Library District. And each month our Poet Laureate, Peter Harris and Carla Samet, will provide a poetry event here at the library. This month's event is a workshop and panel called The Art of Writing Poems for Others, which will be led by the Cynthia Brianna. And excuse me, but your names, apologies ahead of time. Elizabeth Gonzalez and Brian Sonia Wallace. Before I turn it over to the host, I would like to read our land acknowledgement statement. And the Altadena Library District acknowledges our presence on the traditional ancestral enunciated land of the Gabrielino Tongva people. We commit to learning, educating, and informing our staff and the residents of Altadena about the Gabrielino Tongva people, present and past. And on that note, I would like to hand it over to, I believe, Carla. And thank you for coming.
Okay, greetings, everyone. Hi, I'm Peter Harris, and along with Carl, I'm the Poet Laureate here in Altadena. So we want to get started with these brilliant folks on this panel, but we want to tell you a couple things. This is part of a season of activities. We're very proud of the way we configured our laureate work. So every month we will do something here, and except for December, that's the day, the month dedicated to Christmas Tree Lane, so we don't get involved in that. In October, as you see on your chair, I'll be reading with two marvelous writers. One, Beth Marquez, lives right here in Altadena. Very unsung, but just a marvelous, marvelous writer and a great person, a scholar in her own right. And then Shahe Mankari, who is a wonderful writer. I've known him since the 90s. He's also an educator. So we're very excited to have both of those colleagues come through. So please keep your calendars lit up for our work. We're gonna really celebrate poetry and work hard to celebrate Altadena and the San Gabriel Valley. We also want to tell you that we have initiated an interesting, or what we think is an interesting way to encourage the creation of new poetry that we will subsequently publish in the Altadena Poetry Review. So we'll invite you to go onto the site and look at it, but also keep an eye, go to the submissions policy, new policy. You only get published this year if you go onto the Synergy portfolio, look at the gorgeous art. We have one of our artists here, Viviana's here. Look at the art and write something new in synergy with that art. You're welcome to send me stuff otherwise, but we ain't publishing it. If you don't write something new in engagement with that new art, that you won't be published in the review this year. That's the policy. So with that, Carla, it is all yours.
All right, I guess I have to crouch down. So I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists. 2 out of 3 are here right now, and the other is almost here. So first of all, I want to introduce the West Hollywood City Poet Laureate, Brian Wallace. I had the pleasure of getting to know and being introduced to the joy and the intensity of typewriter poetry on the spot composing. And the first year that we did it, we set up at Pride in West Hollywood. And we churned those poems out. We were a poetry assembly line, but very custom as well. We got lots of people to cry, so it was fun. And Brian has spent the last decade writing poems for over 10,000 strangers based on their stories in a string of unlikely residencies. Very interesting, ranging from Amtrak to the Mall of America. In 2021, he was named an Academy of American Poets Laureate. He's a fellow for the he was named the Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellow for LGBTQ plus poetry activism, and his work has appeared in Poets.org, Rolling Stone, and The Guardian. Brian's the author of the Poetry of Strangers, What I Learned Traveling America with a Typewriter, and I believe he has copies here. Nice, and he teaches at the UCLA Extension Writers Program. And you can find out more about him at on his website, briansoniawallace.com. Welcome, Brian. Very fortunate to have Liz Gonzalez, who is the one who actually introduced me to having a poem first written for me, a custom poem. They were set up at Union Station, and it was wonderful. Got to pass through that beautiful Union Station and have a poem written for me. Liz Gonzalez is a fourth generation Southern Californian. She's the author of the original OLG, the first Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in San Bernardino, forthcoming, and Dancing in the Santa Ana Winds, poems y cuentos, new and selected, 2018. They're both from Los Nietos Press. Her creative nonfiction recently appeared in Poets and Writers magazine, which you have a copy of. Some of you do anyway over there, and Airlight. Her poems also recently appeared in the International Literary Quarterly in the anthologies What They Leave Behind and Pure Chicanics, Writers of the 21st Century. She's the founder of Women's Right In, serves on the Inlandia Institute Publication Committee and Board of Directors, and teaches creative writing also at the UCLA Extension Writers Program. We have a third person who's on her way in, and I'm just going to go ahead and introduce her in absentia, and she'll be coming right in here because I want to get us started. Cynthia Alexandra is a literary activist and community organizer through the arts. She's the director of the Rap Saloon reading series, First Fridays. She's which is at HIUSA hybrid event and literary art series that centers voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color writers in a multilingual international setting. And in 2003, she founded Love on Demand Global, and that is how we knew about her skills creating custom-ordered poetry for charity and opportunities for writers to contribute to causes they're passionate about. She's on time. Oh, good. She's on her way in. Cynthia is the daughter of Mexican immigrants and grew up in South LA. She teaches at California State Fullerton in the African American Studies Department as a lecturer in the Ethnic Studies Department. And I'm Carla Sam. So Cynthia's going to be making her way in, and we will definitely come back to her. But I want to go ahead and get started with the two panelists that are here. And I want to start out with a question just about overall, what is your experience? Where have you been writing? What's your experience with writing poems on demand? Where, when, how did you first get started?
I'll go first because I don't have as as much experience as Brian. So the first time I did it was at the Union Station in April 2018 for an event called The Poet Is In at the Union Station. 12 Los Angeles-based poets, including myself, wrote poems for people during rush hour on a Friday. The event was hosted by Metro Art Los Angeles, and we were set up in the courtyard there. It was very nice. They had strategic set up, and music students from Colbert School played classical music during the event. And last Saturday afternoon, to prepare for this event, I put a call out. I mean, I met with 3 different people on Zoom separately. The call out on Facebook to ask if anybody would like to have a poem written for them, and those are the people that responded. And I typed their poem on a computer, at Union Station was on a typewriter, but last Saturday I typed the poem on the computer and then emailed the poem to them. But I want to add that also, although I haven't written many poems on the spot, I have written poems for people based on what they told me. It's just that I didn't do it on the spot.
I'll come in, I'll say, I think I have sort of maybe the reverse experience of a lot of people where I'd kind of written for myself, but I really started writing poetry, writing for other people. So in 2012, I heard a story on NPR about somebody doing this in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. And I thought that's kind of cool. And there was an arts nonprofit that had an activation of the Metro opening for the Expo line, which had just been built in downtown. So there's an interesting link, I think, to transit with this. And I was just looking for something that I could do there. And one of the folks who was organizing had a typewriter, and I borrowed it and wrote poems there. And that kind of led to an explosion of doing this in various places and contexts. And for a while, it was a lot of kind of getting together with friends in a park and writing stuff. And we would go kind of posting poems around neighborhoods next to, like lost dog posters and stuff. But what ended up happening in 2014 is I was laid off from a job and was just sort of trying to trying to regain some semblance of control over my life. And I thought, okay, let me try for a month to challenge myself to pay my rent with poetry. And I had written for people in public, the tips had averaged to about $50 an hour. So I know it's not bad. So I figured, okay, if I'm able to do this even for like 4 or 5 hours a day in public places, there's a possibility that I can do this. And everything's kind of been spawned from that. So I have a company, Rent Poet, that does weddings, corporate events, and we're writing for a conference in San Diego on Friday. And then, of course, the Pride Poets with the city of West Hollywood, that's about bringing LGBT poets to its practice and having them write for members of our community, where so often the stories that we have are kept inside and not voiced or heard or honored. And so being able to do that, I think is really important. And oh yeah, and we did, because COVID, we did a poetry hotline so people could call in and get a poem written. That was kind of fun. There was the Episcopal Church had a Dial a Priest hotline that they'd stopped using. And I'd been introduced to the organizer, and so they lent us the Dial a Priest hotline as a Dial a Poet, which they thought was well in their mission. And I guess I'll say the last thing is the sort of godmother of typewriter poetry in Los Angeles, who's not in Los Angeles anymore, is a woman named Jacqueline Suskin, who's an author who has a number of books out and has been doing this here for 15 years maybe. And I remember when I first started doing it, I was all excited and we got coffee together and I was like, I want to do this thing and I want to, be out making money from it. And she was a little bit territorial. And I think for good reason, because I think it's something where, especially as artists, we can kind of hold our work close. And one of the things that I really believe, especially with a niche practice like this, is the more people who are doing it, the more people will know about it, and the more we're creating opportunities for poets and writers to be in dialogue with the public and having these conversations. And so, yeah, that's my invitation to everyone after tonight's workshop, to go to your local farmer's market or your local library and try it out and see what happens.
Yeah. So the question is, what is your experience with writing poems on demand? Where, when, how?
Thank you so much. Hello everyone. It's good to see you all. My name is Cynthia Alexandra. I'm the founder of Love on Demand Global, and this organization, which is custom ordered poetry for charity, has taken on 2 iterations during the course of during its life. So I graduated from Swarthmore College, small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, where poetry was the rage. The hottest parties were poetry parties. We I exceeded fire codes till 2 in the morning, reading poem after poem. And there was multiple literary arts magazines, and 2 of which I was an editor on, 1 of which I was a founder on. One of the things that we did during Valentine's Day was set up one typewriter. The editors of one of the journals, Small Craft Warners, we set up one typewriter, which we borrowed from the library, and 1 ream of red paper on Valentine's Day, my senior year. People, students came by and they wrote 2 or 3 words, essentially ordering a poem. And throughout the day, we took shifts, in between classes, we sat, we picked up sometimes anonymous orders, sometimes we knew who ordered them. And with, 2 or 3 words, we sat down and we typed a poem on the spot. And we literally left it there. There was no interaction. Sometimes we knew who ordered it, sometimes we didn't. And the students who ordered them would come by throughout the day and take them home. So that seed turned into Love on Demand. In 2003, when I graduated, I was poet in residence at Self-Help Graphics and Art. This is when I met co-poet laureate Peter J. Harris, co-poet laureate of Altadena, Peter J. Harris. And so I was giving workshops in East LA for young adults and adults. And I began simultaneously well, first of all, I tried to buy a typewriter specifically so that I could go to 3rd Street Promenade. And, I used to see artists sketching for people. So I thought, oh, I could do that with poetry. Take this idea that we started in this experience of college. But it took me weeks to actually get a permit because I wasn't a performer, I wasn't a vendor, I wasn't distributing propaganda. They sent me to the police department, they sent me to City Hall, they sent me, and I was like, all I'm gonna do is write poems for people. And so I partnered with Self-Help Graphics and Art at the time, so I tabled technically as a nonprofit, but with this project as an umbrella. We did it for free for several years. Eventually, I incorporated my students into it. With 1 typewriter, there was 15 or 20 poets taking orders from people. Sometimes we'd be out there, 7, 8 hours, write 60 poems or so, completely for free. We would literally push people's donations away. Okay, this was a very romantic idea of, purely for the inspiration. And, it's romantic, but it's really true. That's the core of it. So that was the first iteration of this. We did have a documentary, mini documentary made on us. An article came out in Untitled Magazine, and so on and so forth. I did sort of put it on hold for a couple of years. I'm an educator. I'm one of those full-time extra on the weekend, super dedicated educators. And so that sort of, I incorporated poetry into the classroom, more so those years. Its second iteration, Love on Demand Global, as a social enterprise came about when I took social sustainability classes, global sustainability classes at UCLA Extension, but in particular, I learned about what a social enterprise was. A social business essentially is a business that does well, that does good in the community while doing well financially. And it is founded specifically to create ties with the community. And so I decided to, number one, make the ask for donations, but specifically to donate the proceeds to different charities. And so what we do now is we partner with local bookstores, with local vendors, and with the proceeds that we do get, and by proceeds I mean people donate either for on-demand poems or more developed poem portraits. And whoever hosts us, like a bookstore, they get part of the proceeds. We also donate to different charities like Planned Parenthood, like Black Lives Matter, like the Bail Project. like the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee. And like Brian was talking about, bringing in other poets in the community, we also have guest poets who table with us. Sometimes there's 3 typewriters, sometimes there's 5. And so the guest poets often decide, suggest which charity is important to them. So what we do is we create, we essentially raise money through writing love poems. And we strengthen community relationships between the artist community, the poetry community, the local independent vendors, local bookstores, the public who often doesn't write poetry themselves are the ones who order. And also we're taking poems, love poems, and very directly translating them into fiscal donations for local and global causes. And so in this way, poetry creates love, creates art, and also creates change.
Thank you so much for being. The next question is, what are some moments that stood out for you? A particular poem, a particular person? And I wanted to see if each of you might have a poem that you could read that you wrote for someone on demand.
So I have to write out all my answers, or else I'll forget things. So I've written only 5 poems on demand, so they all stand out to me. The interactions are brief, but you make a deep connection with people. You connect on a deep level, and the process is a gift. A stranger or someone you don't know well, or a loved one is vulnerable with you. And then you have to listen deeply. And I think that that's also important, because we don't listen to each other a lot anymore, so that you get to just take this time out to listen deeply in order to create the poem. And so I say it's a joyful and deep experience. So 2 moments that stood out to me was when I met Carla, because Carla and I are active in the local writing scene, but I'd never interacted with her before. And she was torn about she was moving to New York, but she didn't end up moving to New York. But she was moving to New York, and she was torn about leaving her young adult son. And so I wrote a poem about that for her. And then the poem that I'm going to read, he was the first person I met with on Saturday when I did the Zoom writings, and he's an acquaintance. And he was at home when we Zoomed, and so I tell people you can, I would like to write about a person, place, or object, or an experience that you had. And so he picked up a spoon that was his mother's spoon, cooking spoon. And I think that being able to be at home and actually hold it brought back more memories, brought back more detail for him. So that went really well. And we're not going to read, everybody's going to talk now. No, go ahead. Okay. All right. Marisa's wooden spoon. Marco, Marisa called her 9-year-old son to the kitchen. You ate everything? On the stove sat the evidence. The once full pot of spinach, empty, except for 1 inch that Marco left on the bottom, hoping his mother wouldn't notice the rest was missing. The same with the pasta and sauce. After a hard day at school, bullied for being chubby, Marco found Marisa's dinner alone in the kitchen, filling the air with an enticing aroma. She was out. He picked up the long-handled wooden spoon Marisa had used for cooking and spanking for as long as he could remember, and scooped a bite for comfort, then another and another and another. The spoon loved to taste Marisa's delicious Italian meals as much as Marco did. That spoon witnessed everything that happened in the home over the years, from family gatherings to breakfast to late night snacks to Marco's mischievousness. Another time when Marco had been naughty, chased him through the house, waving the spoon in the air, calling his name. She swung and a piece of the bowl on the spoon flew off. I'm so sorry, Marco. She hugged and kissed her son. Marisa never meant to harm him, just scare him a little for being a stronzo. 25 years later, Marco finally told her the truth. The spoon broke because she hit the chest of drawers on the way to his bottom. She only tapped him. Marisa passed on May 15th, 2012, the month of Mary. Her last hour of life, he held her and sang her out. Of her belongings, the spoon is the most valuable to him. He uses it to cook her recipes, just like she taught him. If he ever has to escape a fire, like Marisa and her family were forced to do when Marshal Tito's communist army invaded her home in Italian Istria, the one thing he'll be sure to grab is the spoon, keeper of the memories, keeper of all of the flavors of Marco's life.
Live, and I just want to say that some of the poems, when you have time to really sit with the person, and sometimes we don't get the whole story, so it's like it's a story created by poet and by recipient together, and so sometimes we make it up as we go along too. But you'll see that the poems are long and short, and when you go to do it today, you won't have a lot of time, and that was the case for some of us when we were on a poetry hotline, where write poets where you only have a few minutes to kind of find out what that person needs a poem for. The next person, Brian.
All right.
Something that really stood out, someone who you particularly made you laugh or made you cry, or you made them laugh.
Yeah, everyone cries.
Yeah.
No, Cynthia's the love poems, I'm the tragedy poems. Those are in some ways my favorite, because I think that part of the service that we're providing, you have to be careful who you tell that you're a poet who will write poems for you. I wasn't planning on sharing this one, but I want to. So last week, my college roommate from my first year, I met him, I was 18, he was 17, in St. Andrews, Scotland. And he has brain cancer that is treatable but not curable, so it will kill him eventually. He's had 3 procedures, he's 32. And his wife now has developed a thyroid condition where her bones are all growing and her face is changing, and it was her birthday yesterday. And so last week, he called me and he said, Brian, I need a poem. It's my wife's birthday. She's been vomiting nonstop for the last 2 months. Our relationship is completely strained. You're a professional, figure it out. And this is the poem. It arrived in New York yesterday. Most of the time, for the titles of these poems, I just say that they're for a person's name. This one has a title. It's called Low Orbit Beacon. And I should add that they are like sci-fi and heavy metal birds. And you'll hear different details in here of kind of the things that he had talked about. The one that's sort of the motif through the poem is that the only thing, as she's been vomiting that he's been able to do is go to the gas station and get her a blue slushie. And that's been the token of love in this time. A blue slushie is a starship. We, refugees from our own bodies, all our planets alien. In the Adirondacks, we chase spiders with singing bowls. The mountains whistle, miracles melt on our tongues. At King Tut's Wawa hut, the music is an extension of a girl. The boy hears the notes every time he looks at her. Every time. She knew so much music he'd never heard of. Music that seemed to already know him. She was so cool. They'd play at world building. Ruined castles, red rocks under a red moon, tongues blue. It's already the future. We're nowhere we recognize. Learning to make a home again with everything broken, breaking. There's no mistaking this for a good life. The mother of music is pain. Nothing makes sense except the way a guitar wails, the way a moon rises in the mountains. Who doesn't want time travel on their birthday? The world will always betray us. But a blue slushie is a starship. A moment, cold and sweet, that cuts through the darkness. There are so many stars, all singing.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was really beautiful. Have you heard back from him yet?
I did. I texted him yesterday and I said, happy birthday. Did she get the poem? And he said, oh, I said, did the poem arrive okay? He said, it did, yeah, on her birthday. She loved it and says thanks.
Great. Okay, so Cynthia. Poems you wrote. One of these things.
I want to say that I love this idea of a token of love. The blue slushie, there's so much that people bring into the conversation that is very textural, very evocative. And sometimes these voices, these conversations, often the emotion, the tears, the laughter keeps the conversation going. So I'd like to actually share a poem that kept that conversation going. The spirit of the two people who ordered it together really kept speaking to me. And so they didn't know it, but I was still in conversation with them after I wrote their poem. So if I may, I'll read the original poem that I wrote. This was at 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, one street away from the Pacific Ocean. From the Pacific Ocean. And then the second iteration, which I wrote, maybe a week or two afterwards, to continue the conversation. So I met two women. They were visiting from London. They were in love. Both of them were named Anna. They said, people call us Anna squared. One was pushing the other on a wheelchair because I forget how she had broken her ankle. Oh, you'll hear about ankle. I forget how she had broken her ankle, but she had a cast over her broken ankle. And she said, we're in love and we like to make up words. And also that they met at a superhero party. And they were wearing their pants on the outside of their trousers. Pants is what you call underwear in London, and trousers are, wait, is that right? Pants on the outside of trousers. So underwear on the outside of their pants. And they like to make up words. So I'll read the first iteration and then the second. For Anna L, love Anna N. People call us Anna squared. Not mathematically, but in reverse. You are like the specific ocean, pacifically kissing me awake. Pants on the outside of trousers, like broken people walking, a cast over my broken ankle. Like superheroes Hieronymus instead of anonymous, and sidekicks up punched. You're like transatlantic saltwater. Fun with you is like frenzy, fun more frenzy than blank. Sometimes I put stand-in words there because I need to keep going, so I just put the word blank. Fun more frenzy than blank, like an insomniac shark, swimming, lest Oxygen doesn't reach my gills. Awake all night like a shark. You're like transatlantic saltwater, and I'm the frenzied fish. Evolution left behind. My blood running too much carbon dioxide, and you're like salt water through my gills. Oxygen, O2, you are oxygen squared. You're like 2 parts oxygen, 1 part hydration. Our names alone, our lives together, a palindrome. Like beginning in the middle and spreading both ways, like a palindrome, like our mirror names multiplied or better, yet raised to the tower of 2. T-O. And if I may, I will read the second iteration of that. Again, in conversation with these two women in love. I titled this Oceanography. Not mathematically, but in reverse. You are like the specific ocean, pacifically kissing you awake. Pants on the outside of trousers, superheroes Hieronymus instead of anonymous. Broken people rolling instead of sitting, the cast over my broken angle. You're like transatlantic saltwater, and I'm the frenzied fish. Insomniac shark, too much carbon dioxide in the blood. You are 2 parts oxygen through this gash, a woman's gill, a woman's breath by motion. Our lives together now, beginning in the middle and spreading both ways, like a palindrome, like handheld pyrotechnics, acrobatics, hydronautics, like the odd coupling of compound words, like prefixes mixed and maxed, like an accidental countdown, secrets, liftoff. With you, it is like the figure 8, like drawing a geometric shape in the air, like rubber stamps and their feet stomping 3-legged races. You are like a field of windsocks. You are earmuffs and mittens and rubber flippers on land. Kissing you is like the word snorkel. You are the surprise of sound traveling faster underwater than through the air. You are phenomenology, like the occurrence and the word thrice, like oceanography, emotionography, landmark discoveries in the field, oceanography, ocean, oh. You're like a blindfold, then hands on your shoulders and a spin, heightened senses like flying blind while waiting for your voice to echo. We might be the flightless bird, the crawling fish, the sapphic swan, nature's compound words, the incongruities, the miracle of misfits.
And lest you be intimidated when you sit down on typewriters to type a poem for whoever you pair up with, if you do that, a lot of times, and there's somebody here, another Frankie's here, who's one of the tribe poets, who brought their typewriter too, and a lot of times sometimes you have a chance to go back and work on it, and other times you're just like, boom, writing it, typing in all the errors that you get on a manual typewriter, and then taking pictures so we have some record and obligation folks. I have just a question that I just want a quick answer about off the top of your head. Where might you like to write on-demand typewriter poetry that you haven't already done? And it occurred to me when I heard some of you speaking that it would be really interesting if we, in addition to Uber Eats, we had Uber Poetry. So that'd be my quote.
Okay, so I would love to work with elderly people in their homes. Well, yeah, at their homes or at nursing homes. Because especially, well, I love hanging out with elderly people, but especially, because of COVID, a lot of elderly people have been isolated. So, and even if meeting them by Zoom would be really cool. I also like the idea of writing poems for people, maybe during their lunch while they're at work, such as a factory or construction site. Somewhere where people are working with their bodies. And I really love to write, and I'd like to teach them how to write poems too for people. And I'd like to do the same with junior high and high school students. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Thank you, Liz.
Oh, I love the poem that I didn't read that's in the book is for a 95-year-old who I met on the train. But yeah, I'll say the most meaningful context, I think that it's a little bit different from your question, but whatever. The most meaningful context I think I've written in Irvine, there's an oncology hospital. And every year they host a children's ball for all of the teenagers who weren't able to go to their prom because they had cancer. And so it's like their makeup prom. And I've written there 2 years in a row now. And just to be able to speak with young people, in their late teens or just out of their teens and their families and loved ones, and have those interactions and the level of joy and gratitude that happens there. That's been, I think, the most meaningful for me. And then the thing that I've seen that I thought was the coolest is, I don't know if they still do it, but for a while, CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, which is like the miles of tubes under Europe that they use to prove the existence of the God particle, had an artist residency. And I would quite like to write poems there.
Well, you did Mall of America, so I think that would be a lot of.
Yeah.
I think to answer this question, I would love to expand the access to the number of poets globally taking orders on demand. So I think my answer is more, thinking about a format and accessibility and expanding the practice of it more so than a specific place. And so I actually think specifically have been renewing my, I call it dream planning, but really sitting and thinking about how to expand the project, not only in our very vibrant Los Angeles poetry community and beyond that, now that you mentioned all of that, all of the virtual possibilities that this took on during the pandemic for us, for Love on Demand Global as well. And that really opened up the possibilities of how to partner with more local businesses virtually. So I'm really thinking about how to strengthen the relationships that we already have in the literary arts community in Los Angeles and in Southern California and even globally. So I think, I don't have one specific place, but to answer, I'd like it to be, accessible to people who, otherwise would not think that poetry is for them. We know how accessible poetry is. We know as writers, as readers. A lot of people who order poems from us, some of them don't ever read poetry and some of them are avid readers. But I think, like I said, more than a specific place, I would like to just bring it to, make it as common as and as accessible as ordering flowers, as ordering, a singing telegram. So really thinking about I'm really thinking about how to expand that.
Awesome. Okay, we're gonna start moving in. We're gonna be moving in soon to the portion of writing poems, getting poems in for you or writing one. But first, the question I want to ask is about best practices for writing on-demand poetry. And then once each of them answer that, I'm going to give you the opportunity if you want to ask a question as well.
All right, I'll be brief because I think they're gonna cover, I don't wanna overlap or repeat what they're gonna say. One, I'm a slow writer and I have mild aphasia. So I accept my limitations and I need more time to do it. Otherwise, I get stressed and that blocks me up even more. So I think it's, fine to honor, yourself for what your needs are. And like I said before, for subject, I give them the option to choose from a person, including a pet, because bird people are people, a place, an object, or a significant experience. And if they choose a person or place or object instead of an experience, they usually come up with some significant anecdotes like Marco did for his Marissa poem. And after the subject is chosen, I ask them to tell me about it, and I take notes, a lot of notes as they talk. And when there's a natural pause, then I ask them questions that prompt them to give me more details. And I'd like to write a very rough draft or outline by hand before typing up on the poem, whether on a typewriter or on the computer. But sometimes the poem just comes out in the order that it's going to be. And so, it just happens that way. And just one other thing, when working with people one-on-one that I wanted to say is, I think it's important to avoid scents that aren't naturally in place because they make some folks ill. And to be mindful of that scents where one wears or room fresheners, like those Glade fresheners, incense, candles, sometimes that can ruin the experience for people because it makes them ill. It's odd, but I just wanted to make sure that I said that. So they'll have a lot more to say.
I love that consideration. Everyone does it differently. Everyone has their own questions that work for them. I like the question, what do you need a poem about? Or what do you need a poem about today? I like the implication in that question that a poem is necessary. And I think it makes people think. And I think a big part, the biggest part of this practice is it's a practice of listening more than it is a practice of writing for me. Because the person as they're speaking to you is going to tell you the poem and you're just translating it onto the typewriter. And so I usually say, what do you need a poem about? They get flustered for a moment, and I love that moment too, because it's not a moment that I think we have often in our lives where we're forced to sit with ourselves and say, okay, what's the thing? I'll say it can be for you or it can be for somebody else. Sometimes I'll just say, what's on your mind? I'll always ask 3 or 4 follow-up questions, getting those specific sensory details, because sometimes people are very forthright. They'll be like, love or the beach. And that's boring. But it's not for them because they just have associations that aren't shared yet. So it's about digging to get those associations so that you can share them. And then as far as the actual writing itself, I have a formula that is arbitrary, but I like it. And I think that every good on-demand poem needs 4 things. You need something familiar, so the person sees themselves in it, they see their world in it. It's not just wild images. You need something strange, something that pulls them out of their reality, something that's a confrontation with the other. You need something beautiful, so they know it's a poem. A lot of contemporary poetry is like really not concerned with beauty, and I think it's something, especially if you're writing for non-poets, that's really important. Why not have the moon? Why not have some flowers? They're nice. And then the final thing is a joke. I think it's really important that this practice not take itself too seriously. And like Cynthia, in your piece, I love the humor in it, and the rhymes, and the playfulness of it. Because I think if the poem that I read, obviously, is a very heavy poem because it's coming at a heavy time. But even within that, there's in-jokes, there's references, there's things that make the person go, oh, that's not just what this writer, they went on a tangent. That's me. I'm seeing myself in that, and this is us being in dialogue. And the last thing I'll say is I don't do any pre-writing in terms of writing of the poem, but I'll write down specific things that the person says that I might not remember. And I'll pry for specifics. So like, you love listening to music together. Okay, what's the song? What's the genre? What's the band? When did you see them? And the more specific details get into that poem, I think, the more people are able to use it as a mirror and to see themselves. And I think the most rewarding thing in this practice is I'll run into people and they'll say, you wrote me a poem 5 years ago, and I have it framed on my bedside, or I have it up on the fridge. And so there's this real sense, I think, as writers, we're used to like a poem is in a book and then it's closed and it's on a shelf. But like these are visual art pieces that live in people's lives. So taking into account as well the visuals of the thing, which helps if you're typing really fast and you're like, I have to fill up. I always write on small, like 3x5 or 4x6 cards. But if you've got to fill one of those up in 3 minutes while someone's staring at you, it helps to have creative spacing and to really think about it as kind of a visual flow that can follow your train of thought. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut up, is just.
By that, that when you type it out, or when you, no,
I don't handwrite.
oh, okay, it's when you lay it out, because this is visually.
Exactly. Yeah. So thinking about, maybe one line is just a word, or there's a sentence that I want to give extra weight to, and so I'll keep white space around it. And yeah, just shout out to the surrealists, because this is really a practice of spontaneous writing that goes back a long, long time. And we're just sort of adding another person and being intentional about that. But I think getting out of your own way is the most important thing. Like, I will write the worst poems and people will cry. It's not about the poem, it's about the interaction.
Great, thank you.
These are, yes, so many things that I can relate to. I'll try and just narrow down 3 things. I think the most important thing when writing poems on the spot is to leave the journey of creation in. That means leave what you think are mistakes, leave your own musings, leave your own wonderings. Whatever you think, trust that it will lead you to that place of discovery and follow it. Not every word will be a gem, but every word is part of the path to discovering where you didn't know the poem will lead you. So you heard me read a poem and I left the word blank in there. That's to keep myself going. You can choose a word, stick the word love in there, orange, yellow, red, choose a word, but keep going. I do that, same with Brian. I have my fingers, actually, it's more like this. They're really old typewriters. But I cannot do it without the machine. I can't, but I need to have contact with the machine so that I can keep the rhythm going. And it's slower than you think. It's really not like, improvising, something aloud. It's not as fast as you speak at all. You don't have to type. You cannot type in these old machines as fast as you think. It's not a computer. So you have really time to walk yourself through your own meanderings and leave them in. I very rarely go back and X out words, but usually I only do that when I accidentally punched like the wrong, when it's illegible, but I leave all of the words in there and really trust that the golden path, will emerge. So 1, trust yourself, leave the journey in there. Number 2, I find a lot of people express the same things because as human beings, we express love, we express grief. To me, all of those things are different iterations of what grief. I think of them as love poems because what people express really are centered in deep emotion. Now it's hard, not to fall into cliche, right? But it's actually very easy to get people to tell you their stories. So I begin with questions like, what do you love? list everything. It can be, you know, things that you love to do, which is what often people say. It can be things that you love to see, look at, experience, be near, hold, are fascinated with, okay, and see if they can give you a list. From that list, you'll see there's something you can follow up questions about. If they say, I love riding my bicycle by the ocean, then I often go to when they were kids. Well, you know, tell me about, have you ever fallen off? When did you learn to ride your bike? Get into the memories, because the memories will bring in the senses. And then you can follow up questions about the senses. You know, what color was your bicycle? Where did you, you know, have you ever broken a bone? What did you, so you can ask as many specific questions to get to stuff, things that they can remember and hold and touch, smell, see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And then from that, what I often do is I couple the stuff with the emotion. So if someone loves oranges, you know, metaphor is king. Simile is king. Your love is like an orange, around and, okay. Maybe you get the idea, right? You can really flip through, you know, all sorts of, not just adjectives, but, you know, your love is like an orange. It leaves my fingernails, oh, the scent of you deep in my fingernails for hours, right? So you can extend that. I call those, well, you know, you get the idea. The third thing, yeah, listen. Be open to being moved, because I agree that that's what brings meaning to the poem. Deep listening. That's really where the experience lies. That's the memory. That's the magic part. And that's the strength that we create and the love that we create in this process.
Thank you so much. Okay, yeah.
You know, I've worked in this capacity, mentored by Cynthia, among other people. I had a society of Southern California business out with IP festival books. But one thing that I learned with multiple poets love people. Some folks love people, love poetry, but they're not the greatest or the fastest typers on an old typewriter. So I would, you know, my high school student, I would become the poet. I became the typer at the street promenade, and I became a typer at another place. It was great for the poet to come over and tell me the poem that they were working on, and they would speak it out loud. And I thought that was like a very unique experience for me behind the typewriter. I got to hear every of his poems, but also if you're going to do a reading, right, and you do have poets who are not experts on the typewriter, you might have an assigned poet. It couldn't just be a typer, because the typer has to know what lines look like, the line breaks are, and just do whatever the poet tells you to do. So that additional experience I wanted to share about the typer.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions before we get started on the workshop part of the writing part? And I know that we're running a little bit behind, so but we're gonna have time to write now. But I just want to see if there's any other quick questions.
You collect the poems?
Yeah, we do. When we were doing it at Pride, we took pictures of the poems that we typed, and yeah, I think all of us probably hang on to make a copy of the poems that we thank God for camera phones, right? Yeah. I'm gonna turn it over to Brian to help organize us into you have the opportunity to pair up with someone, or if you just want to have a poem written for you, We have a group of people here who are ready to write poems for you. We have a number of typewriters and we also have paper if you, for those, because we don't have one typewriter for that.
All right, we'll see kind of how this process goes and let it be fairly organic. I think my role here is mostly to be timekeeper and to give you a panic attack. You're welcome. The idea here is that we're going to pair off. If you would rather not write and just receive a poem, you can come to the front table and do that. If there's any folks, raise your hand if you are just wanting to receive a poem versus write. Totally okay if you are. Fantastic. And we'll have poets up here who are able to help you. Otherwise, we're going to have you pair off, and what I'll do is I'll give you about, I forget what times we said. I really like the number 7. 7 minutes to interview each other and both ask each other questions and listen to each other and trade stories and get to know each other. And then we'll take another 7 minutes to actually get something down on the paper. And then we'll take a little bit of time after. And thank you so much for bringing in your experience, because I think the thing we didn't talk about was the gifting of the poem. And I think that's like can be the most sacred part after the conversation, is reading the words that you've written, seeing the person's reaction. How often do we as poets get the privilege of seeing someone react in real time to our work? And especially when it's for them, and then actually giving them the physical copy. And yeah, I'd encourage everyone to take a photo of your poem, but I'd also encourage everyone to let go of your poem and give it to the other person and genuinely write a poem that you are going to give away. So that being said, if you are wanting a poem written for you and would rather not pair up for that conversation, if you all want to come up here right now, and I'll go ahead, and if I can have a couple volunteers help kind of wrangle
poem that was either written for you or that you wrote for somebody else, and somebody likes to read their poem aloud? You want to read the poem?
Very creative.
Okay, do you want to come up and read? Do you want to do your poem right now?
I was hearing you. My name's Steve.
Okay, this is Jean. Okay.
Oh my gosh, so is there like my mark?
You're right there, Gina, good.
No.
Don't worry about it.
All right, I'll just go for it. My partner is Cecily and she's in 8th grade. So I called it for Cecily. I am young, articulate, aware, and contemplative. When I was 8 or 9, I never would have pictured a pandemic, its gaps, its spaces, in our schooling, our travels, our possibilities. And now I'm on an odyssey. I see routine return, but it feels strange, leakier, permeable, open to flexing. I'm still questing, still growing, never still for long. My travels will return. The world will reopen. I will step into it.
How was that? Oh, you mean, yeah, the whole thing is totally true. This child has never touched a typewriter before, and there are flames coming out that part of it. But yeah, so we just started talking story, and we haven't seen each other for a number of years. But her mom and I, Carlin, we used to teach writing together, and so, you know, yeah, I was lucky. I had a really good partner. So yeah, that was really good.
Thank you so much. Would somebody else like to come and share the poem that was written for them or by them? Yes, you may come up together. Down here. Let's see. Come on over here. Come over here.
Okay. What about this poem? Yeah, I think that sounds fun. So my name is Sarah. I'm Zinger. Hi, Sarah and Zinger. Yeah, a little bit this. I wrote this poem based on our conversation. Yeah, it's mine now. Yeah, it's all for you, baby. It's all for you. And I would like to say the context is that Zinger said she would like to be poemed real hard. So that's what this poem is about. And its title is, I would be willing to trade a real hard poem. I would be willing to trade with a blind person. I want to be tactile today. I like to be blind today. That's what I need to touch. Fireflies, glaciers, freedom from the screens. No ditty, no digital. I want creative freedom just to be. Look at me without eyes that see, feel the dark. What could be better than the internet? You know what? Do what your heart feels.
Beautiful. Okay, somebody else, please come and share the poem that was written for you or written by you. Come on up. What is your name? Ellis? Okay, so please stand, yeah, stand in front of the thank you, Ellis. Okay, thanks. I wrote this poem for Pamela over there. And she said I should come and read it. So. Open a cabinet and you might find soap. Very practical, essential, even required. A part of every day without thinking. Routine, but capable of creating slow, quiet moments. Intentional. A time to reflect and think. Bubbles forming as thoughts pop. Washing away noise. Revealing intention. Focusing on what was already there. Returning to home, shedding dust gathered in the day. Shining, all ready to make your way. Nice, thank you, Ellis. And yes, please come on out. What is your name? Cecily. Okay, great. And are you gonna read a poem that was written for you or by you? Oh, great.
This is called masquerade. She does not sit. No, she cannot let this dance disappear. So she wakes and she serves, she listens and she learns. She curses this dormancy, threatening to overtake her wandering peace. On a haunted house overlooking the sea, on a prince's island, drifting and wandering, never stationary. In philosophies previously unexplored, in vicarious stories that she carries with her always. On her unbroken spine, dancing past the dark years, skirting them with expertise. Out of the cemetery left behind before the hurricane can hit. She is not the eye, but the ever-moving winds, carrying folklore for breakfast and tales only she could hold in the palm of her tireless hand. Someone's mother, someone's home, someone's everything, someone's unknown. A candle flickering at the end of a lifelong tunnel, the mural on the wall. Only visible in the mercurial starlight, and she has waded the 7 seas and knows of the 8th, so now she steps into the daylight, the lace ribbon of this masquerade.
Wow.
Wow.
So someone else, come on now. Okay, sure, come on, both of you, come on up.
Come on, Thelma.
Is it Thelma and Fabiana?
Viviana.
Viviana, okay. And so you're gonna read, you wrote, well, you'll come up here and explain. Yeah, come on up here and explain. Come on up here in front of the camera. It's my buddy Thelma. She told me about Charlie. Charlie, my daughter's son and my Aquarius. He was born de mi hija mía, from mi hija. She came and Charlie came out of her. He swam out of Christine, a brave birth, a brave child who was born with his eyes open. Charlie was always curious and daring. He saw the river and wanted to learn about it. He wanted to touch it and go deep into it. I ran to the water and I screamed for Charlie. He screamed back, "Don't worry, Grandma. Grandma, don't come in. You might drown." I cried, "Charlie, be afraid so you won't drown. Granny, I'm gonna be a deep sea diver. I'm gonna do everything brave. I like to feel the cold, the sharp rocks on the bottom of the water. I will always like to do the wild, cold, sharp, toe kissing water things." I said, "Where you dive, I will follow you in my mind." And Charlie says, "Granny, you will always be my grandma, even when I go away." I don't know, this makes me sad. "Even when I go away to the other side of the river, to the other side of the world." I know you're missed.
I may not be able to read the poem because I have to handwrite it, but my scribbles look like my typewriter was working. So this is about Viviana, whom everyone who knows Viviana knows she is an outstanding poet and artist, a visual artist, a fine artist. Art is lonely. That's the name of this. If art is life, and it is, then art is lonely, she told me. She, genius poet, the artist who paints, sews, sings, who brings passion to everyday things. Emotions move her, she says. I sad, for I'm a woman, she whispers. And for women, life is passion, grief, anger, jealousy. Then children leave. Silent days slide into solitary prayers, meditations, for what else stays when sons and daughters go away? Yes, the paints. Her brush is stiff, with flaking kaleidoscopes of oil and acrylics she used to stroke with ease onto canvas in the happy days. She prays now, not paint. She sits in shadow in the evenings, remembering that she used to fly through hours with what gods do. Create, 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 not die.
Thank you so much, Viviana and Thelma. Someone else, would you like to come up and share? Poem, you want to come up and you're gonna share? Cynthia, you're gonna share a poem that you read for Susan.
I wrote this poem for Susan, who wants to give it as a gift to her daughter Danny. Danny's 15. Danny's an artist, and Susan told me about a drawing that Danny did on her own thigh, and it's in the shape of the contour of a hand. Just so that image was really the inspiration, and so many other things that Susan told me about. To Danny, love mom. Your own hand is enough. Its contours like an imagined landscape, but its lines as close to your knowing as your lifetime is to mine. What I mean is that you are the truest part of what I know. And I know that by your own hand, you create the truest part of yourself too. You can trace your own mind the way you trace the contours of an image, a face, a portrait, your own reflection. When the world is unreal, feel the strength in your becoming. It is your own becoming, like the coming together of your dreams on paper, a life you can hold, a life you can make, a life already beautiful in its own making. The beauty of your becoming and becoming the wonder of the surface seemingly still, then opening itself into its own perfect, unimaginable form.
Okay, so it's 7:59. So is there one more person who wants to go? We have time for one more? Going once,
Somebody go.
going twice? Yeah, okay, come on up. Okay, well, you can go after.
Yeah, we have time, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. What is your name? And Pamela, and you're reading a poem that you wrote for somebody? Okay, cool.
COVID close co-op friends, no longer connected by concerns, the chaos of new things. Music, dancing, distant family, all near yet far. Grad school immersed, immediate, hopeful, new, like the growing importance of now.
Very nice. Thank you, Pamela. And that poem was written by Pamela for Ellis. And come on over. What is your name? Courtney. Courtney, and are you reading a poem that you wrote for somebody or somebody wrote for you? I wrote. Okay.
Tired Mylin on a school night. Supporting friend Carla, wordsmith and catalyst of change. Seeking joy, transforming lives one paper at a time. Finding inspiration, opening self, nurturing others to possibilities. Watching. Growing minds find a place in the world. Knowing plans change. Language matures. History teaches, but need not be repeated. Seeking the joy which breaks through like sunlight in a forest. Nurturing equity, acceptance, respect for all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your poems. And we really appreciate you being here and participating. in this event. So thank you so much for coming up here.
Let's give a hand to our panelists. Who inspired all this beautiful poetry? You guys are all on fire. I was so impressed. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Well, we're gonna wrap it up. We want to also let you know that if you saw a magazine in your chair, take it. It's from Poets and Writers Organization. Poets and Writers is actually starting to support our work, especially beginning in November. But just stay tuned, and also as writers and neighbors, community members, embrace your residency as citizens of the literary community. We want you to understand that this magazine is a very sweet Bible for you. Please subscribe, please join in the conversation about art and about literature in our region in Southern California, Megalopolis. Thank you so much, Carla.
Thank you. Let's also thank our tech laureate, who's also a poet. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Hope to see you next month.
That's right, come through.